Hi there, Bob from INSYDIUM here. In this tech preview, I'm going to show you just some of the new liquids tools that have been added to the INSYDIUM Fused Beta. There is a new flip fluid solver, there is a GPU mesher, and there's also a crown splash generator. So let's have a look at some of the effects that we can make with these new tools. The new flip solver has got an inbuilt viscosity solver which enables us to do these amazing viscous scenes. We can data map this for variable viscosity. We can do things like this ribboning with this chocolate pour. All of this meshed with our GPU mesher, which can pass on particle color and velocities. There's a crown splash generator to set up shots like this, and we get amazing surface tension and fluid sheeting effects. You can of course use them for larger scale scenes too. Here's a nice tank scene with quite a complex animated collider object, this mocap character. So I've got loads to show you then, and don't forget the INSYDIUM Black Friday sale is on, 50% off everything on the INSYDIUM website. So let's fire up NeXus and we'll begin. In this scene, we're going to take this basic flip fluid sim and we're going to make a variable viscosity simulation from this. So this is looking really nice just as a liquid, but we're going to make this a nice gloopy slime. Let's go to our nxFluids. We're in the new flip mode, and what we're going to do first is reduce this default flip fraction of 95%. I'm going to reduce that down to about 60, and this is going to create a much smoother fluid flow even without the viscosity. It takes away some of that noisy surface detail. So yeah, that's smoothing that out somewhat. And now what we're going to do is add some viscosity. So this has a bespoke viscosity solver. On 0, obviously, it's inactive. Any value above 0 and it starts using the new viscosity solver. If we put this on 100, pretty high amount, we're going to get a really kind of gloopy, viscous fluid. And it starts to slide off when we get, look, this really nice big bulbous lump sliding off and then being pulled down with the gravity and stretching. That's looking pretty cool. What we could also do is add a little bit of friction to our bust here. Let's put our collision tag with a bit of friction on there, and that'll just mean that the particles in contact with the bust are more likely to stick to it and hold them in position. So now what we're able to do is vary this amount of viscosity. At the moment it's uniform across all of these particles, but what we want to do is have it be less uniform. Now a little later I'll show you a more sophisticated way of doing this by using animated particle color, but in this scene we're just going to do a quick cheaty way where the fast particles are less viscous and the slow particles are more viscous. And how are we going to do that? Well, all we need to do is map this viscosity amount, which we've set at 100, and we're going to map it to the speed of the particles. To do that, we'll go to the mapping tab and we're going to add a particle speed map. The source is the flip APIC options. We want to map the viscosity to the particle speed, and we're going to say that the minimum range is going to be up to 5 centimeters per second speed. They'll have full viscosity, and then that viscosity will ramp down until they've got to 15 centimeters speed and above. They'll have less viscosity. So this has been mapped to our x-axis of our graph here. So we've got 5 centimeters speed up to 15 centimeters per second speed, and then the viscosity power is on this y-axis from 0 to full. So what we want to say is when the particles are slow, they've got full velocity, viscosity, and as they get faster up until this amount, the viscosity amount reduces. So now if we hit play, you'll see that the faster moving particles won't be as gloopy. We won't have as big globules. As they start moving quickly, they'll get less viscous and will develop more kind of thin sheets. And you can see that we're getting varying amounts of viscosity now, dependent on how quickly those particles are moving. Let's go to our friction on our bust and increase this up so we get some really nice sticking of our fluids to the surface of that bust, and that's looking pretty cool. And just by adding that bit of variation in the viscosity, we can really accentuate these stretchy bits, and at render time that's going to look really cool. So that's a really quick and cheaty way of setting up a nice viscosity solve along with some variable viscosity using data mapping. Let's just switch off that emitter, and what we'll do is we've pre-cached a much higher resolution scene here with this emitter. So if I play this one through, this is just simulated at higher fluid settings, smaller voxels and lots more particles to bring out loads of really cool detail in this sim, but all of the settings and the data mapping were set up in the same way. We've got something that's looking really nice. So let's have a look at another new liquids tool. This is the GPU nxMesher. Let's bring that in, and this will mesh particles using the graphics card. So let's go to the Object tab of our Mesher, and we just need to drag in our high-res emitter. And what we'll do is, obviously this is going to be too low a resolution at the moment. It's going to look very large and very bulbous and blobby. So what we want to do is let's reduce the radius down to say 2. And we need to reduce the polygon size so we have more polygons to give more detail. So let's put this down to maybe 1.5. Something like that's looking pretty cool. And this, by default, look, is in the surface type spheres mode. And this is very similar to the way in which the OpenVDB mesher would work. So in spheres mode, you would then need to introduce some smoothing filters to get the look that you want. And look, we've got these smoothing modifiers that you're able to add here. But there is another surface type which works brilliantly for certain scenes, and that is the Zubridson version. So if we click on this as our surface type, now we have got, look, without any smoothing filters whatsoever, let's make that emitter invisible, we have got a very clean, pretty smooth mesh there with some really nice thin sheeting going on. Got this really nice kind of almost surface tension globule here as some of that viscous fluid has dripped down. So that's looking really cool. What a fast setup with our new nxMesher. Very nice. So let's just have a look at what this might look like. We'll go to our material manager, and we've just got a slime material, and we'll go to Redshift, render view. Let's hit render. And there we have got our bust, and you can see that we've got this really nice kind of thin sheet that our mesher has brought out, and this is without doing any kind of smoothing and really making any fine adjustments. Obviously you can adjust that as much as you like to get the look that you want, but that is creating a really nice, quick and easy to set up variable viscosity scene, and that is meshed with a new GPU nxMesher. We'll get back to some more stylized small scale and macro shots in a moment, but before we do, let's explore this larger scale drop tank to have a look at some of the basic options in our new fluids tools. So let's go to our nxFluids, and you can see that we still have available the PBD and SPH, which you'll already be familiar with, but now we have GPU flip fluids, which uses this voxel grid to simulate our fluid, and there is a choice between the flip or the APIC solver, both of which use the same voxel grid but have different characteristics. We'll leave it in flip for now, and as we said, if we have our flip fraction high, the default is 95%, it gives this nice turbulent, noisy fluid surface, which gives the impression of a mid to larger scale simulation, and we get this really nice splashy wave detail with the flip with a high fraction value. We've got some collision objects here, and we've just got, look, a load of cube primitives under a null, which has an xParticles collider tag. So then if we animate these, we get really nice kind of splashy collision effects, and that's working really well. And all of these kind of reflections and ripples, they're only being caused by the gravity, the fluid solve, and the fluid's interaction with these collision objects and the walls of our domain. That's looking really good. Let's just quickly jump into another scene, and this is our zombie crawl scene. So we've got this motion capture character with a collider tag on, and this is a cached simulation here, so we've got loads more particles, slightly higher voxel resolution, and you can see that we're getting really nice interaction between our animated collision object and our fluid body. And this is just the fluid particles here. We haven't got any spray or bubbles or foam for detail, but even with just the fluid, we're getting really nice interaction and fluid motion. It's looking great. Okay, let's jump back to our drop tank. So what we're able to do here is, if we go to our nxFluids, obviously we'll explore viscosity and our surface tension in other scenes. We've already looked at viscosity somewhat, but what we can do is change the solver. And if we flip this over to APIC, what you'll see is APIC is slightly smoother than flip, especially if you've got your flip fraction set high as we did. But it is really good at maintaining angular momentum. What that means is that you'll see that these kind of ripples will keep going until they hit the walls, and then they'll ripple back, and it holds that energy for a long time. You get these really nice fluid flows using this APIC solver, and it's especially good when we've got kind of animated splashy collisions, because we get these ripples which will then ripple along and look and meet all the way to our wall and then start reflecting back. So that is our APIC solver. And obviously we'll leave it in APIC for now, because we're going to inject some more forces. We can use all of the NeXus modifiers with these fluids to good effect. So for example, let's bring in a NeXus wind modifier, and here it is. It's our big fan there, look, and go to our wind. We'll increase the strength up to, say, I don't know, 250. Let's put it in von Karman mode, which gives us some nice turbulent gusting, so something like that. Hit play, and you can see the wind is forcing the particles over to this end of our domain, and we've got that high turbulence and friction velocity giving us this really noisy fluid solve. And if we animate that wind, let's rotate our fan round, we can start kind of blowing it to this side of our grid. So we've got loads of useful control there just by using an animated wind modifier. Another couple of effects that we could do, obviously you could just use a standard turbulence to bring some nice turbulent swirling. Let's bring in a NeXus rotate modifier. Now the rotate modifier will do as you would imagine. It's going to rotate on this Z-axis here. So actually we want to pitch this up, don't we? Let's pitch that up so it's rotating this way. Something like that, and we'll move it into the center of our domain, and we can use this to create a kind of whirlpooling effect. Let's hit play. So now our rotate's moving around, and as our fluid starts to settle and the force of that initial drop dissipates, then our rotate starts taking over, and we're getting this cool rotating force of our particles drawn to the center of that grid. Very cool. So as you can see, loads of control as you would expect. Rock solid fluid solve with both the APIC and the flip options within this solver, and then we can manipulate that fluid solve with all of the usual NeXus modifiers and tools. In this scene, we've got some gloopy particles from this animated emitter, and they're colliding with our object here. This is going to be our ice cream. So what we want to do is not have this kind of gloopy fluid. We want those very thin folding ribbons, and it's going to be our molten chocolate. So the way we do that is very simple. All we need to do is go to our emitter and make sure that there isn't any width. We'll bring this way down so we have this emitter that's only one particle thick, and that is going to give us that perfect thin ribboning sheet. And as we animate, we get beautiful folding with our new viscosity solver. So that's looking really cool. But what we want to do is further refine this. This is our molten chocolate, and we want it to set as it comes into contact with our frozen ice cream. So we're going to do that. We can data map our fluid viscosity value, and we're going to do that to the color of the particles. So first we need to animate this particle color. So what we're going to do is activate this NeXus question. And what we've got in this NeXus question, if we go to the question, we have a document object distance question, and we've dragged in our ice cream cube. And this is just asking if particles are less than 3 centimeters away from the polygons of this cube, then do something. And that something, the action, is to set the color to white. And we've got the weight on a very low amount, so it fades to white rather than just snaps to white. So if we hit play now on the same simulation, we get our ribbon, and the particles that are within that distance threshold gradually turn to white. Brilliant. So this is going to be the start of our sim. And what we're going to do is say the white particles are going to have the full, very high viscosity value, and the black particles are going to have less viscosity. So let's go back to our nxFluids and get this set up. Because we want our pouring particles to have this amount of viscosity, but then we want that viscosity to ramp up when they become white, we actually need to put this amount on to that full amount. So let's put this on to say 150, which now is going to be way too much because we've just got loads of viscosity, and so the folds are going to be really big, and obviously it works, it solves well, but it's not the look that we want. But now we have got the room to map this value to this particle color. So let's go to our mapping tab. We're going to add a map. The source is not PBD. We're using Flip APIC fluids, the new ones. We want to map the viscosity to the particle, not the age, the color. Now the color brightness is mapped to the bottom, this x-axis here, 0 black to 1 white. And the viscosity strength is on the Y, 0 viscosity to full strength viscosity. So it's saying black particles have got 0, and as they get lighter, they get more and more viscosity until they get to full. So we don't want the black ones to have 0 viscosity, we want a little bit, so let's put that up to maybe something like that. So now we should have our molten chocolate, which has less viscosity, and it's going to fold nicely, but as they turn white, that viscosity now ramps up, and we can see it happening. Look, the white ones aren't falling as quickly as our still molten black ones. That's looking really cool. So one last thing we can do is we want all of the particles to eventually set. So what we could do is speed that up a little bit by using one more modifier. Let's bring in a NeXus blend modifier, and we're going to blend these colors. And in the object tab, we're going to set the blend mode to add, so particles will only get lighter, and we're going to have the distance maybe at say 5 centimeters with a strength of, I don't know, maybe 100. So what this is saying is every single particle will search within 5 centimeters of itself, and it will blend its color with other particles, but it'll only get lighter. And what that means is you'll see that our molten particles that are kind of left in those ridges will just gradually set, and it'll be a little quicker than waiting for them to fall within that question. So yeah, look, you can see these ones beginning to set now. This is beginning to set, and that blend is just blending those colors. That's looking really good. Nice one. Okay, so now let's activate this nxMesher. So GPU meshing to mesh this. And we've also got a vertex color here within our mesher to pass on that particle color to render time. And if we go to our Redshift render view and render this scene, you'll see that we have got our mesh working, and you can see, look, where the particles are still molten, we have the much more shiny looking molten liquid, and where they are set, we have got this much more diffuse roughness going on here. So that's looking really cool. Let's just play a few frames through, and we can play this. Look, we are simulating, we are GPU meshing, and we're rendering all at the same time here. And there we have got our really nice molten chocolate coming down, folding on our ice cream. And then as that gets colder, as it cools, it begins to set, and it stops moving so much, it becomes more viscous. We arrest that dropping down onto the ice cream as it begins to set and freeze. Brilliant. So that's how we can use the fantastic new NeXus GPU tools together to create this really cool ribboning molten chocolate pour. In this scene, we've got this really nice viscous folding effect, and this is a cached particle simulation we did with our new Flip Viscous solver. Looks great, and we want to mesh this for render time. So what we'll do is activate this nxMesher, and what we have in our mesher is our emitter that's dragged into our layers, because that's what we want to mesh, and we've also got one smoothing layer. You can have multiple smoothing layers, and this is set to mean curvature. Now at the moment, if we hit NB, you can see obviously there's no resolution here, it's just a big blob. So let's just make some adjustments. The radius we're going to put down to say 0.8, which all but makes our mesh disappear because we don't have the polygon resolution to be able to mesh at that size. So let's reduce our polygon size to maybe 0.3. Yep, look, and now we have got this nice mesh. Let's hit NA. And that's looking good, but obviously we need to smooth this out. So what we really want is we want to maintain this curve detail, but we want to smoothen out the kind of flatter bits. And that's where our mean curvature filter is going to work really well. So with this smoothing, all we need to do is increase our iterations. Let's go up to 10. We may need slightly more, but yeah, look, even at 10, that's looking pretty decent. Let's try this maybe up to 13. Yeah, and what you're trying to do obviously is retain as much detail as possible, but then smoothen it out so it looks as smooth as you need. There's a bit of push and pulling required to get the polygon size, the radius, and the amount of smoothing you're using to get the look that's required for your shot. But for us, this is going to do for now. We've got some really nice folds and it looks really smooth. Excellent. Before we render though, what we need to do is access that particle color. So the way we do that is really easy. We just go to the Export Tags tab and we can transfer color. So this will take that particle color. It'll generate a color vertex map which stores that particle color, and this can be then used at render time. So if we go back to the first frame, let's just click that. So we're looking at it, press play. And now, yep, look, so this is our mesh, and we're getting pretty quick mesh generation, seeing as it's so dense. We're getting this really nice, smooth mesh, and then that particle color is being transferred into this color vertex tag. This is looking really nice. So now we have got that mesh looking good. Let's just try a test render. If we go to our material manager here, we've got this goop material. This is very basic, but what it does, it's using this color vertex map to drive the subsurface scattering color. So on this frame, this is looking nice. Let's go to our redshift render view. We'll hit render. And you'll see that, yeah, look at that, fantastic. So really nice, smooth mesh where required, but we have retained this amazing fold detail here with particle color transferred into the mesh via that color vertex tag. In this scene, we're going to create a custom crown splash using the new nxSplash modifier. So what we have, if I just switch it off for a second, we have got a torus emitter here, and we have got our nxSplash, and you can see our interface. This is where we design our crown splash, and you can make this kind of as realistic or as stylized as you like. So there are two basic elements to this. We have got our power handles here, and then we've got our shaping handles on this top radius and this bottom radius. So if we just hit play now with them in this settings, we've got a little bit of splashing, but not enough to overpower the gravity. So what we could do is reduce this top radius to make it more angled, something like that. And now we've got our particles plopping down. Perhaps a little bit too strong, so let's put our strength down to maybe 100 and have a look at our strength handles here. So what we need to do is, if we want 5 peaks to our crown splash, then we need double that number in handles, so 10 handles. So let's do that. Let's do a 5 peak splash. So we'll put 10 handles here. Now we've got 10 handles at the top, and if we take these handles and we take each alternate one and just drop it down a bit, drop that down, drop this one down a little bit, this one down a little bit, and this one. Now we've got our peaks and our troughs, so the higher ones have more power than the lower ones. If we hit play now, yeah, look, we've got our 5 peaks to our crown splash, and that is splashing down. And because we've got our nxFluids active, we're using the flip mode here, we're getting this nice solve. Now we've got kind of a low particle count here, so at the moment we're getting some nice movement, some nice surface tension, we're getting some nice thin sheeting, but the sheeting is breaking up a little bit, and we'll fix that with more particles once we've finished designing the splash. The next thing that we're able to do, if we want these to come up higher, what we could do is increase our height. Let's bring this up like that. Now this has the effect of making the angle a bit tighter as well, so we could reduce that top radius, increase the top radius, so it kind of fans out a bit more. So there we've got something like that. Let's just leave it at that for now. So we can make more adjustments by changing the shape of this, and we do that with our shaping handles. Now I'm going to leave the bottom radius shaping handles as they are because we want it to fit perfectly within the torus. We want it to be circular, but at the top we can make some adjustments. So look, if we take the handles where we've got our low powered handles and bring these in, what we're going to do is start shaping the areas that are the thin sheet bits adjoining the tendrils. It looks a bit like a flower petal, something like that. And if I hit play, you'll see that this is passed on into the shape. Look at the shape of that. It's curving up as our crown splash is developing. So that looks really cool. Bring that up, and then it comes down. Now at the moment, all of our top power handles are exactly the same. We could maybe just make those a little bit more random. Something like that maybe. Just so they're not all the same. And we've got a turbulence in the scene, so you can mess about with other modifiers and mix them in with this to get different looks, but that's looking pretty cool. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's just up that particle count to get a proper amount. We'll put this on from 5,000 to say 20,000 per frame, and now this will take longer to simulate, but there's loads more fluid calculations going on. But what you're going to see is we're going to get fantastic thin sheeting between these tendrils, and look at that. Look how good that that particle fluid is. Really nice. So let's just have a look at what that looks like when meshed and rendered. We'll activate this nxMesher. It'll mesh really quickly on the GPU. Let's go to Redshift render view and we'll start rendering. And yeah, look, there we go. We've got our really cool thin sheet crown splash with nice surface tension on the points. That's looking really good for this this kind of stylized splash. Very cool. Right, so that's that. What we could also do is we were in our nxFluids, and I told you we used the flip solver for this. And the flip solver, if you reduce this flip fraction, the default's 95, we put it to 58, it makes it a very kind of smooth fluid. And it's good for these kind of very small scale splashes. But what we could do is use the different solver within Flip. We can use the APIC solver. Now the APIC solver is brilliant at maintaining angular momentum, and that gives us the chance to do something a little bit different. So we'll put it on APIC. To compensate for this difference in solver, we need a bit more surface tension. I'm going to put it up to 5, and I'm going to put the weak particle repulsion strength up to 10, and this is to help maintain our thin sheets of fluid. And we also, because the momentum is so well preserved, it'll be too strong on these settings, the splash. Look, it's going to go up too high. Yeah, so let's go to our splash, and we're going to reduce this strength down to maybe 80%. Still might be too much. Let's just give it a go on 80 and see what we get. But you'll see that when these start falling, the areas of thin sheeting between our tendrils will kind of hang around for longer. Yeah, look, and we've got this real kind of crown shape now, haven't we? Whereas before with the flip, it really kind of arched down here. So now that we've got that, let's go to Redshift render view. So this is what we had with our flip sim. Let's render our APIC version, and there you can see the obvious difference. So a very different kind of stylized look. Very cool. So that's how we can use nxSplash to art direct these really cool crown splash simulations and loads of tools to make them as realistic or as stylized as you need. In this scene, we're going to have a look at some examples of some macro splash photography that we've set up using the new nxFluids. So we've got this really nice wrapping around of our fluid around our scene lemon. You can see that the lemon geometry has got a collider tag, and then we've just got an emitter here firing particles really fast at our lemon. And we haven't got any gravity in this scene because we're kind of faking this high-speed photography look. And instead, we've got a direction modifier, which is just kind of pushing the particles along in this direction. And in these settings, we have got really nice surface tension, really nice sheeting, and really nice wrapping around of the liquid around our collision geometry. Now, the secret to getting these to look as detailed as you need is to have a fluid with a very dense voxel grid, so really high detail and high accuracy, and the accuracy is got by going to the solver settings and having high sub-step values. The higher that simulation accuracy, the better these sheeting and beading effects will be. So this is looking really nice. Let's just activate our NeXus GPU mesher and we'll just do a quick render of that. Let's move that up there. And you can see that we've got this really cool wrapping around of our sheeted water around our scene lemon, and that looks excellent, doesn't it? Like that a lot. Let's just switch that off. So that is one example. Now you may want our fluid flip and also the APIC solver will give you this wrapping around of geometry, and it happens just by the nature of how the solver works. It looks really good, but you may want to force more of almost a crown splash similar to what we explored in the previous scene, and to do that we can manipulate this splash somewhat. So let me show you some examples of where we have done that. And all we have done, we've added to the scene a collider object which will be hidden from the camera, and here we just have a cylinder primitive with a displacer giving it this nice bumpy surface and a smoothing modifier just to smoothen off that displacement a little. And by having this active, what we're able to do is generate that kind of crown splash and wrapping simultaneously. So let's just have a look at one of our examples. If we go back to the beginning, we'll select this cache. So there we go. By using our hidden collider, we've managed to get something that looks like this with really good sheeting and beautiful surface tension tendrils here. That looks excellent, doesn't it? So let's just activate that mesher once more, and we'll do another render of this one. So here is our wrapping around effect without that collision object, and if we render with our collision object, we get this really cool macro sheeting and surface tension tendrils. They look excellent. I like that a lot. Okay, and if we just play that through, you can see that we get really nice animation of that splash. It looks excellent. And the beauty of this method is that if we go to our displacer, let's just dolly in a bit, we can get very different versions of this splash just by changing the displacement of this. So if we go to our displacer, to the shading, we're just using a noise to displace it. And look, if we just change the random seed, we get different displacement. And each one is going to give you a different splash. So it's really easy to cycle through and look dev this until you get one that you or your client likes. So let's just switch that off. And so that's exactly what we have done with these other two examples. We've seen the first one. Here is the second example. So exactly the same splash, but just with a different, this has got a different displacer noise seed. So we get something that looks like that. Let's just mesh that. And again, we'll have a quick render. So there was our previous one. And here is our new one, which is obviously a very different look, a bit more splashy, that one, looking cool. And then we have also got this one, which is another look, just with another displacer seed. We've got some kind of nice, it's kind of weighted, it's biased towards the top, our sheeting, with some really nice leading edge surface tension there. Let's just do one last render of that. That's looking very nice. And there is our third example. So all of those exactly the same splash, but just changing the deformation of that little collision disc gives you loads of different splash looks to look from. So there you have it, just some of the new tools that have been added to the INSYDIUM Fused Beta. And remember, the Black Friday sale is on now, 50% off everything on the INSYDIUM website. So go check it out.